On Monday, October 21st, a legislative study committee that's exploring ways of ensuring long-term stability and sustainability of funding for Vermont's 25 community media centers met at the State House in Montpelier to hear more testimony about the work of the access channels, often referred to as PEG, or Public Education and Government Channels, and their financial supports going forward. The overwhelming bulk of the PEG station's operating revenue comes from what are called franchise fees, applied to consumers' cable TV bills. But between cord cutting and regulatory uncertainty at the federal level, the funding model for public access channels has been thrown into question. The Vermont Access Network, or VAN, the membership organization for the public access stations, is anticipating a steady decline of revenue from cable franchise fees, leading to a search for alternative sources of funding. The franchise fees are in effect a rental payment that cable companies have to pay for use of public property and rights of way. Against this background, the PEG Study Committee held a public hearing and heard testimony from several people, some of them industry officers, others who are users of PEG access services, who told the 7 members of the committee why PEG access presence was important to their communities.
PEG stations provide thousands of hours of gavel-to-gavel coverage that chronicle just how decisions are being made, and my reporters even reach out to the local PEG stations to get copies of meetings they missed or to review sections of meetings that got out of hand or were confusing. And that's what is unique, that access is available to every Vermonter.
About this, we play a vital role in providing cultural coverage, historical coverage, and local issues that really impact the daily lives of our citizens. We partner with organizations in our communities, the historical societies, libraries, and schools. Several years ago, we also recognized that the cable industry is evolving, the regulatory structure may change, and we began thinking strategically about development and fundraising. And we embarked on changing the culture of our organization to support development and fundraising efforts. We built a modest list of donors and underwriters. In light of the recent events, the slight loss of subscribers, the FCC ruling, and the GAAP accounting changes, we're exploring all options to sustain our future. We're making many operational changes to address the funding shortfalls, and we continue to develop our fundraising plans for the future. Unfortunately, after offering services free of charge for nearly 25 years, we're compelled to charge fees to our constituents for many of our services. We're reviewing our policies, we're developing fee-for-service programs for our schools and our nonprofit organizations, and we've instituted modest fees for our training programs. We've held off on purchasing new technology, and our staff will not receive cost of living increases. Despite all of these strategies, 92% of our funding is still derived from the cable subscribers. These austerity measures and modest revenue generating strategies won't be enough to sustain the organization.
Charlotte Central School. Have you ever had the opportunity to talk live with an astronaut while they are living and working in space on board the International Space Station?
It's a very rare opportunity, but 2 years ago, our entire middle school had a live video conversation with astronaut Drew Boostell and Scott Tingle. And it only was able to happen thanks to the support our school received from RETN, our local community media centers.
We learned about the International Space Station and how it is used as an orbiting laboratory to help NASA learn how humans might travel to Mars and beyond. We started by researching all the different kinds of experiments that take place during a mission, and then picked one that seemed especially interesting.
The 2 students from Charlotte, Estelle Emmons and Charlie Taylor, talked to us afterwards about what it was like testifying before the committee.
It was pretty terrifying. It was definitely not calm. It was very scary.
Dan Glanville, who represents the cable industry on the study committee, said that for the near term at least, the funding stream was likely to remain stable and urged a wait-and-see approach.
Things that I think are worth considering in the fact that we're not at a cliff today. And I think Lauren Glenn is correct. Let's perhaps look at what the options are, but I think the reverse of that is fair, to look at what the limitations of that are too. So that I do think that there has to be perhaps a broader analysis. And as a result of not being at a cliff today, I think it would be, in my opinion, a fair recommendation of this group to explore the options and limitations so that we could perhaps regroup at a later date in 12 to 24 months to relook at that issue.
But on the federal level, there's some uncertainty about how the cable industry will interpret a ruling by the Federal Communications Commission handed down last August, which broadened the definition of how franchise fees could be calculated. Instead of being paid as a straightforward cash pass-through from the cable companies, the FCC's ruling allows the cable companies to include in-kind services, which could include the costs of maintaining channels or remote origination sites as part of the fee structure. That could have a severe impact on the financial underpinnings of PEG access stations, depending on how the cable companies interpret the ruling. Meanwhile, back at the hearing in Montpelier, the committee will work on a draft of its findings and the recommendations it will eventually make to the legislature for its consideration when it returns to Montpelier in January. Lauren Glenn Davidian, the executive director of the Burlington-based CCTV Center for Media and Democracy, and a committee member, gave us her takeaway from the hearing.
How powerful was that to hear those incredible comments in support of free speech, democracy, and public access television? As somebody that's been working in this field from the beginning, it never ceases to move me to hear from people from all over the state, from those young students, from Charlotte, and just from everyone. So that was very powerful for me, and I think that it supports the idea of the value of the importance of pay access. And we heard a few comments today about ways forward in terms of right-of-way fees. You know, all utilities, including cable and telephone, use the public rights-of-way. And those public rights-of-way are public property, state and local property. And that is the basis of the franchise fee, is because it's a kind of rental charge for the use. And I think that that needs to be expanded. But the state's hands are tied by the FCC and federal legislation. And I think the challenge for us is to look at models in other states that have found some ways around this and to see if we can apply those in Vermont.
We also talked with Senator Becca Balint, the chairwoman of the committee, on the next steps.
And we're going to sort of tease out the threads that we heard this morning in the public hearing and try to land on some recommendations for the legislative session. And it's not clear to me where the committee is. That's why it's going to be important to poll everybody at the top of the meeting to see what were those general themes that emerged. But I'm feeling hopeful. It's not clear really how this will shake out. It could be a slight change in the universal service tax. It could be a connection fee. It could take a lot of different avenues. It also could be a straight appropriation, that we could decide that this is important enough service for Vermonters that we're going to find money in the general fund.
The next meeting of the committee is set for November 6th at the State House in Montpelier. For the GNET TV News Project, I'm Andrew McKeever.